My name is Eric Lombardi, and I'm the founder of More Neighbours Toronto, which is an advocacy group based in Toronto that is seeking to end the housing crisis through policy reform by advocating reforms at every level of government.
Why is missing middle housing important?
We haven't built this type of housing in a very long time. And so even if we were to get all the policy reforms that we are fighting for, we still don't have all the skills, the knowledge, and the expertise in the supply chain. Everything from financial products for missing middle housing through to the different types of building materials, different standards, or even having modular options to being able to build that and have developers who have that experience and focus in the market. And so what I encouraged everyone at this conference to realize is, they're really at the beginning of a much bigger industry, and to see that the projects that they're embarking on are not necessarily just about returning money to themselves, but learning so that they can do more of this at scale in the future.
How do you begin to scale it up?
I think a couple ways. I think first of all, understanding how the pro formas actually result into the outcome of housing that we are trying to see. Understanding what went well, what went wrong, and iteratively learning on that enables those who are building this type of housing to gain the skills, expertise, the suppliers, etc., to be able to continue to improve their methodology for building this kind of housing. And so over time, as you get more experience, you're able to do more projects and increase the scale and pace that you're able to do. The flip side of this is what's important for advocates like me, which is, right now, the number of developable properties in this format is not substantial. It still requires more reform. But there are enough properties that the learnings can be had, and the pace of change that we'll see in policy, I do believe, is inevitably going to get to a place where we do decide as a society that people have the right to build this type of housing on their properties, that more places need spaces like this. And I think even the concepts around businesses and retail existing in more neighborhoods being included in this type of format is going to be important to the growth of our society over the long term. And I guess the last thing I would say is the reason why missing middle housing is so important to advocates, and particularly young people, is because we see it as a desirable form of living for our own futures. And so planners and political leaders who say, well, this isn't going to be a substantial part of the housing future, are really misreading what the demand is, and also misreading the economics of the fact that there are about 3 million single-family properties in this province, and just turning 1 in 4 of them into a fourplex would create 3 million units of housing. That math is inescapable, and eventually policy is going to reflect that.
What's the next policy change needed to make missing middle homes more viable?
I think what we've seen is a lot of municipalities moving independently as a result of encouragement from the federal government to create rules that legalize multiplexes. The problem is most municipalities have not moved to a point to make them feasible. And at the provincial level, we haven't really seen the promises of a new building code, etc. So to me, the major policy changes that have to happen have to come from the provincial government. One, to set universal, universal floor on the standards of expectations about what is allowed by right on every property, and then properties that are either close to transit or major streets, as well as an updated building code to do with outdated policies like a limitation on single stair egress to 2 stories for multifamily buildings. So really, to me, municipalities aren't going to be the right level of government to solve this issue. The key reforms have to be provincial. From just a policy standpoint, there are a couple of levers that we're really not talking about that do need to get pulled. The first one being land use and zoning, and we do talk about that a lot. But I really do think that the next one that governments, and particularly the provincial government, needs to reconcile with is the amount of taxation that's put on every new unit of housing, will never viably allow the market to produce housing that's affordable to the middle class again. If you add it up over all three levels of government in Toronto, it represents $250,000 to $350,000 on 1,000 square feet of living space. That's multiple annual incomes just in taxes that people have to pay a mortgage on top of. It's just not realistic if we ever want to return to a society where housing is affordable.